Hi everyone, Amber here with Yoga How To, and I'm so grateful to be here with you this week. I missed my last episode because, as many of you know, my dog, Ladybug, as I say, I like this image, she was pulled to the other side of the tapestry, and it was unexpected, and I do plan to do a video about her and about how through her amazing little life, she taught me so many lessons about yoga and how dogs do in general, and cats too. But I just have more in my adult life, more experience with dogs. So I'm kind of playing around with that idea, and I'll get there eventually, but I'm not ready for that one yet. What I do want to talk about today is yoga and grief. And just a quick note, friends, this turned into a really long video. I had a lot I wanted to share and say. I will do the thingamabobbers in the bottom. I can't think of words right now, forgive me, where you can click on it and find what you need. So if you want to go right to the practices, do that. I just include the commentary, the discussion on yoga and the energy system, yoga and the subtle body, for those of you who are interested. And I think it can be a nice way to really look at anything that you're going through and any emotional state that you're experiencing. So today we will talk about yoga and grief on a subtle body level. So I'm not going to get into certain traditions and certain aspects. I'm not going to get into that. But what I do want to look at is 3 ways we can consider it from the subtle body. And that is chakras, what's going on with the chakras, what is going on with the Vayus, and what is going on with the Gunas. I'm thinking about it now going, oh, that's a lot to bite off. But we're gonna go for it, because I think when we understand vibrationally what is happening when we are grieving, that can help us to make the decisions about what practices from our yoga toolkit will most support us into very subtly starting to shift that vibration. And that really is our work in yoga. That is the essence of a practice in the Yoga Sutras called Pratipaksha Bhavana, which is choosing the movements of our minds and our emotions. Grief, as much as it sucks, as hard as it is, it's when we're really in the muck. And that is when really that, also though, there's that opportunity for the most illuminating, most dazzling effects of yoga to come through for us in a way that we don't always get in everyday life, in just the mundane life, the normal world, the tedious, boring stuff of life, which are often also just the things we are taking for granted, right? Grief opens us up in a way that we don't always have access to. And so while it's so hard, I think it's important to also recognize that there is something in it that can connect us to our true and abiding self, which is joy, more deeply and more completely and in a more fulfilling way. This is not to say, if you are grieving, suck it up and be happy. I'm not saying that. This is not to say, when you're grieving, the last thing you want to hear is, oh, everything happens for a reason. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying find the gift in it. But I am saying we do have, yoga is teaching us autonomy. Yoga is teaching us to control our inner environment no matter what's happening outside of us. And grief is no different. We don't get outside of this lesson when we are grieving. And there's a lot of beauty in that, and I think it's a really sacred time because of that. And so we'll look at the vibrational effects of grief. We'll look at, well, what does that tell us then? What practices will support us to start to move that dial so that we are moving out of the heaviest vibrations, gently, gently, gently. And none of this is, again, to say don't grieve. None of this is to say to spiritually bypass. But it is to say, don't get stuck in despair. So we'll look at that, and then we'll also talk about what not to do. That'll be a part of the discussion too, because there are yogic practices that, depending on where you're at in your yoga journey, and by the way, we're all in it. You've grieved in the past and you will grieve again. So wherever you're at in your yoga journey, there are some practices that may not be appropriate for you yet, and that may be too harsh. So we will explore this. It may be a long one, because as usual, I don't have a plan. I'm speaking off the top of my head. Wardrobe. It got warm, but it's still cold, so I don't know. There will probably be another change of wardrobe again. So to understand grief on an energetic level in yoga, we need to, and I want to say not just grief, but any human experience. Grief is an interesting one to explore no matter where you are on that journey, even if it's been a very long time since you've lost someone dear to you. Because it's just such a vivid example of how really our bodies and our minds and our emotional states, how all of this works together. And it kind of helps us see how, yoga is telling us these things aren't separate. They are one and the same, but we don't often really get that, do we? We don't often get that our thoughts are our bodies, and our bodies then produce chemical responses that reinforce certain thoughts, that then reinforce certain emotions, right? And that there's this whole complex that's really one and the same. So grief is a good example, because we can really feel how it's in our body. We can really feel how it's in our emotions, and we can really feel the thoughts around it and how they all weave together, really, and how one really can reinforce the other, and so on. To understand the yogic aspect of this, we want to understand a bit about Sankhya philosophy. And if you're in the Cambio Yoga 300-hour program or have taken it, you've heard about this plenty. But if you're not, very shortly, very succinctly, let me just say that it is a philosophy under the philosophy of yoga. It explains how we came to be, why we're here, and in kind of a technical, practical way. What I want you to know about this for this discussion is that in this worldview, which, by the way, there are many worldviews that also uphold this. They have different names than yoga, but that's that perennial philosophy. There's kind of a truth to many, if not all, religions and traditions. Anyhow, maybe I'll get to that later. So in Sankhya philosophy, how did I come to be here in this body, having these thoughts, having these emotions, all of this stuff? And basically anything in it that is not unchanging, anything that is in your experience that's not unchanging, and that's pretty much everything, right? Except your true and abiding nature, which is pure consciousness, joy, truth. Anything that is not eternal in your experience, which again, that's anything that's not your true nature. And that's how we identify the true nature. It's unchanging, it's eternal. Whereas anything that's not, that's of this, what's called prakriti side of things, it changes. It has a beginning and an end, as far as our experience goes of it anyway. Now, that doesn't make it a bad thing. It just makes it like, let's not think that that's what we are. Instead, this is an experience we're having. Well, how does this prakriti side of things, this side, sometimes called the small s self, not small ass self, versus the side that is that true and abiding side, the side that doesn't change, the side that is pure consciousness. That's the big S self. How does that side evolve and become who we are and how anything is? And it all comes down basically to vibrational levels getting more and more, getting slower and slower and densifying. So it's the more subtle becoming the more gross. So that prakriti side of things, that little s self side of things starts at in fact, it's called a pre-vibration. It starts at the most subtle level of vibration, and that vibration densifies until we have this whole world around us. So knowing that, thoughts are more subtle than your finger. And yet, thoughts can affect finger because thoughts' vibration can become densified and become matter, okay? The other measure of what is on this side of things that we are experiencing, the small s self, versus the side of things that our true and abiding nature is the big S self, the who we are. You're experiencing it because it's not eternal, it is changeable, and it's not pure. Now, purity doesn't mean like pure as the driven snow or anything like that. It just means constituted of only one thing. So your true and abiding nature, that pure consciousness, it just is itself. Whereas on the prakriti, on the smallest side of self, on the experiential side of our nature, it's wound up of three constituents of nature. And these are called our gunas. And this is the first lens I want to look at grief with. So the gunas, they are the most subtle, they're the three subtle basic strands of prakriti that weave together in different combinations and different amounts to create absolutely everything. If you can think of it, it's those three things to some degree. Okay, now the three they're sattva or sattva. The V or the W kind of depend. That's can be argued. It is the most pure. It's the most reflective, the most harmonic strand. So harmonic? I don't know words suddenly. But it is the one we are trying to cultivate more and more of in our lives. It is vibrationally more subtle. It is the one that best reflects our true and abiding nature. So the more sattvic we are, the more we experience joy, the more we experience sacredness, the more we experience harmony, peace, these sorts of things. The next one is movement. It is rajas, R-A-J-A-S, rajas. Rajas is movement. It is what pushes us in the world to get things. And it's kind of this in-between state between sattva, we have rajas, and then at the other end we have tamas. Tamas is dullness, inertia, darkness. It is the most obscuring of the light of the true self. So when we're in matter, it is the slowest vibration, it's the heaviest. It is the one that is where we are most forgetful of our true and abiding nature. You can imagine it, if our true and abiding nature, that joy that we are, is like a light bulb. You can imagine tamas just like a black, oh my gosh, what are those curtains called that cut out all light? I don't know. A black cloth over the light bulb, right, where no light gets through. And so when we're really tamasic, we are only identifying with ourselves on a material level. We really only feel that sense of life here as we know it being true and real. And so when we're looking at grief, and you can feel there's an inertia to it, a heaviness to it. So we can very much see how grief makes us more tamasic, because we've experienced the loss of something from the material world has transitioned to a more subtle world, to the more subtle level. And we are so heavy and dense in our thoughts and our feelings about it at the time, because there is it just, that cloud of tamas comes over us, and it's very hard to really believe that there's more to life than this. Even if we believe it mentally, our bodies have a reaction that is just, the body can be so fearful of death that the body is even just like, nope, this is it, it's over. There's no more connection with that energy, that person, that being. It's done, it's over. And that endedness of grief really is a tamasic energy. So when we know that, then we can start to look at it from the chakra system. Oh, I really bit off a lot today with this talk. I may just go into the energetics of it and save some more of this for later. We'll see. When we are looking at the human energy system, we can imagine that we're talking about these energies that become the body. They could become more densified. Well, before it's in the body, before it's heavy enough to be a body, there's levels of subtlety before that we call the subtle body. They are just finer, faster vibrations, and they really work to kind of hold together what we are and to almost stick us in this dense body, right? And so they have their own systems, just like the physical body has a circulatory system. The subtle body, it's one of its, what we would look at is the chakra system. There are several chakra systems, and I'm not going to get into why that is, other than to say that it depends on the tradition, but one isn't wrong. It's just that there are lots of chakras through the body. These are intersections. These are where if we looked at the energy system, the subtle body, as a map, right? And we have roads and highways going everywhere. These are where the major intersections are. So we have a lot of energy. And these areas, they're governing certain experiences and certain things, and they deal with certain energy frequencies as a result too. So the lower chakras are dealing, in general, these are just the bottom three chakras. Let's pretend that. These are from the perineum, this pelvic area, center of the pelvic area, and the navel, right? And these three are dealing, they are important. They keep us, we need to have this experience in the human body, and they help us to do that. So there's nothing bad about these chakras. But we don't want to only have our energy in these chakras either. And these are dealing with heavier vibrations, and survival, procreation, things like that. And then we get to the heart, and the heart is really kind of a gateway one between what some people call our human and our spiritual self. And then we have throat chakra. Now, these next two are real debated as to where they are. I'm just going to say we have a third eye chakra and crown. There is a whole complex of chakras in the head. There's a bunch of them here, and so depending on what system we're looking at, they may sort them out slightly differently. And then some put even a chakra up here floating above our heads. Here's what we want to know is that, remember what I said about samkhya. It is the more subtle vibrations that are going so fast that as they densify, they become our bodies. Well, before they become our bodies, they become our subtle body. And then our subtle body can then basically become our physical body. But it happens within the system of the chakras as well. We are having lower vibrations that the first chakra governs, and then as we move up this way, this current, those vibrations are getting finer, and the frequencies are moving faster. What does this mean with tamas? Tamas is Tamas and Rajas. So I want to mention Rajas can be linked with anxiety. That was that guna of movement. So we might really experience during grief that tamas keeping us kind of in these lower chakras, as well as maybe anxiety can be. None of the chakras, again, are better than the others. None have only good feeling emotions or bad feeling emotions. I'm just speaking in broad terms energetically. Anxiety can be kind of in these two, but it can also be fear of survival, which can come from first or second chakra. So any of these things that come up in grief, anxiety or the heaviness of it, we are experiencing in our chakra system. And so therefore, of course, we feel it in our bodies, because what's happening in the chakras becomes the body. It is the body. It's just the body at a more subtle level. And the last thing I want to just point out is then we have Vayus. And the Vayus are just, if we're looking at our subtle body again as that roadmap, and we have all of these roads and pathways, those are called nadis, by the way. And they go throughout the whole system, nadis. They go throughout the whole system, where there's a lot of them convening and doing a lot of very specific work around specific energies. Those are chakras. Chakras are throughout the body. These are just the 7 or possibly 8 that we're focused on. But then the direction the energy flows, that's our Vayus, or we could call them prana Vayus more specifically, but let's just call them Vayus. And one of the main Vayus, and we need it, but it's called apana. And apana Vayu, I should have been writing down words all along, but maybe I'll put them in here. But apana is the downward moving Vayu. We obviously need it to sleep, to rest, to just kind of chill out, right? However, you know what's happening with grief with this one, right? So apana gets really strong. And it is basically also the energy moving through us becomes more tamasic. And that apana, because it's heavy, that apana Vayu, which moves downward, gets stronger. And so therefore, more of our energy is really getting locked into these lower chakras. Did that make sense? Let me know if you have questions on that. I hope that gave you some ideas about what's happening energetically to us when we're grieving. And I want to add, none of this is bad. It's what we do with it that matters, right? So it would be perhaps not so beneficial to you if you were grieving exactly the same way 20 years from now as you are now when a death just occurred, right? I'm not saying what your grief needs to look like, but we do know that we want it to evolve and change. And so in the earliest days of grief, when we're really caught in these lower chakra experiences of feeling only, maybe we're telling ourselves there's more. And what's funny is sometimes the energy will break loose and we get really sattvic, and we might have, that's when we do have these beautiful like openings in the veil, and we have these moments of absolute clarity. If you've ever had those when a loved one's died, I had one when I was 23 years old when my great grandma died, and it lasted for about 10 minutes. And I just had such clarity about why everything happened the way it did, and the beauty and the harmony of it all. And of course, that was, my energy just kind of broke loose and got really sattvic, and it moved upward, so that I had realizations that those higher chakras can give. And then it went right back down again. And you might feel some of that in the early days. You also might just feel like you're stuck in the bottom ones. Everyone's experience is different. I'm just saying, in general, this is kind of a map of what happens. And so in those early days, our goal is not to spiritually bypass. And also, our goal is not to get stuck in it. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that when we feel it, we feel it. But then are there times where we can just gently move the dial a bit? Can we just subtly, when we're really tamasic, I had a really tamasic day yesterday. I was also sick, and so just a heavy, heavy day thinking about Ladybug and things. And like on those days, can you find moments of subtle movement? I want to get into that more in a minute. That was a look at what's happening in our subtle body, our energy system, just because I think it's helpful to have. Now, what I'm going to do is refer to something that comes from a system outside of yoga. And again, I'm not a fundamentalist. I don't believe that this way is the only way. I am very much of the belief, as I mentioned earlier, that there is a core truth to all of the great teachings. All of the great teachings, and that it just depends on our culture and our path. I grew up very much exposed to the New Age and metaphysical belief system, which does actually take a lot from the East. And yoga, I don't want to conflate the two. I want to respect the system of yoga and also the other system, but I want to say there are things we can take from any system, and not take them, but look at them and say, okay, can I use this to deepen my yogic understanding and my yoga practice? The thing I want to talk about today is called the emotional scale, and it's a concept talked about by Abraham Hicks. You can look them up if you want to know more, but basically they're of this kind of New Age metaphysical movement, and I think this emotional scale is incredibly helpful. Their concept is that when you are lowest on it, you are at your most disempowered, right? Your most low frequency, your dullest, the most obscured from source. They would use the word source rather than what I'm using, like highest self, big S self, Purusha, true and abiding self, all of that stuff, pure consciousness, these things. So at this bottom end of it, and we can kind of imagine emotionally that this is a very low frequency, like existing more tamasically in our lower chakras, right? Are these heavy, dull, depressed, despairing emotional states, and they are the most obscured from source, to stick with their terminology. As we move up the scale, the emotions become more rajasic. So our state of being, we might feel frustration, we might feel anger, we might feel just kind of those hotter emotions, those emotions with more movement, and then slowly they become, as that movement goes up the scale, the more rajasic emotions then start to, as the frequency of vibration becomes faster, as we start to expand or elevate the emotional state and actually lift our energy up through the chakra system, we are getting into places of compassion, gratitude, love, oneness, wholeness, these sorts of things, where we have completely lifted out of utter despair and disempowerment to empowerment. And even the smallest nudge along that scale can help us to feel more empowered. So even if we go from, I never want to get out of bed again, that deep, heavy, heavy feeling, to, I'm pissed, this shouldn't have happened, there's a little bit of movement, and within that there is some empowerment that will help us get the momentum to once again feel those sweeter, more sattvic feelings, even if we can't fathom accessing them now. So we can imagine the scale that Abraham Hicks talks about. I would frame it very much in terms of the gunas. And when you are looking at your own state in grief, You don't even have to name the feeling you're having. And I want to say too, grief isn't the feeling. Grief is a state that has a whole constellation of feelings, right? And thoughts and actions too. Instead, it can be helpful just to realize, okay, is it down here? Is it more heavy and tamasic? Or does it feel a little like there's more movement to it? And then can I move it just a bit? Is there a way to give it a nudge? So that's something to think about. And this is the thing about yoga is I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly what to do. I'll give you some practices to try. But I'll tell you this, even when you try something and it doesn't work, what you are teaching yourself, this is a really important point. When you practice something, if you have changed your interior experience, which is what yoga is all about, is being empowered enough to change your interior experience regardless of external circumstances, when you can take the reins a bit, even if you don't drive it exactly the way you want to drive it, right? It has a layer of empowerment that is going to be helpful for you through the grief process, because grief is inherently it feels so disempowering because we feel so cut off from our loved one, the good times from the past that we had with them, from all of this stuff, that it brings up mortality, and it is the most disempowered feeling. So anytime we move it, even if we nudge it a little from, say, utter grief to maybe despair feels a little better, we are doing ourselves a bit of a service. Again, I'm not saying avoid your feelings. You can't push them down. It's like pushing a beach ball underwater. This is not what I'm recommending. You push it down, you hold it underwater, and eventually when it pops up, it smacks you in the face. That's not what I'm saying. You actually do need to recognize where you're at. You're taking stock of your feelings. The difference is you're not sticking your finger in the wound of those feelings. Instead, you're going, can I change this just a little? Can I shift this a bit? And that is really the practice of Pratipaksha Bhavana, which is Sutra 2.33, where we put the opposite in front of a harmful, painful feeling / thought / state of being. Now, we don't have to do the exact opposite. It's just like, can we put something there that raises our vibration a little bit? Can we move it just a nudge? So I would even say you don't have to sit there and analyze, which chakra is this in? And why is it stuck in this chakra? You just know, okay, it's lower down there, it's heavy, I want to move it up. When you are going through this, the practices I want you to, especially, let's talk about when you're very fresh and new in a grief journey. These are the days I would say to avoid any of the really stronger practices. What you might want to avoid are big heart openers, because the body is going to fight you on it, and you get this counter reaction. So you get a counter wave. So you try to push it this way and you get this bigger reaction the other way. The body says, no, I'm not ready. And it grips you back emotionally, physically, every which way. And I would start with more gentle heart openers in particular. As far as asana practices, I would say it's fine to do the more rigorous ones if you already have those practices, or if they just if they lift you up and out of of a heavy feeling, do them. But also, if you're real anxious and up here, you might need to move it down a little and slow down a little. I want to also say to avoid really strong breath practices. This includes breath retentions of either the inhalation or exhalation. The thing is, they move so much energy. And unless you are a very long-term yoga practitioner, Part of our yoga practices are building a structure to hold the energy that we're moving through the channels between the chakras, and through the whole energy system, the whole subtle body system. We want it to become through our practices like a quartz mug. Most of us are probably more like clay or even paper mugs. And so if we're forcing a ton of energy and we've already got things going on in there from grief, it's just going to kind of blow our system out. Not irreparably, not irreparably, but why do that? Why do that? So the really more powerful breath practices I would suggest leaving behind for now, and then gently folding them in as you move down the path. So maybe gentle breath retentions, maybe you work into an alternate nostril, things like that, just very gentle. By gentle breath retention too, I can't say that right now. But I mean, even, if, what is the thing that's popular right now? There's box breathing, right? Where you might do 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold for 4. A little 4-second count probably isn't going to cause any issues and might even make you feel better. I'm talking the longer, more intense holds. Though if 4 count feels intense, don't do it. You may have to try things and see how they feel. And remember, even if you feel worse, it's not forever. You haven't broken yourself. And if anything, you've demonstrated to yourself that you can affect your inner state. Next time, just affect it differently. So I'll leave it there. Just kind of avoid those things, the big heart openers and the strong breath practices at this time. So what should you do? Well, look at where you're at. If you're on that lower scale, right, we're trying to move to where we more identify with our true and abiding nature, becoming more sattvic, and we're really tamasic. Sometimes we have to meet the energy where it's at. So it may not be the best thing for you to go run a marathon if you've never run before, or to go to a vinyasa class or a hot class if you've never gone to one before. In fact, it might feel impossible to scrape yourself up off the floor and do those things. So you oftentimes have to meet the energy where it's at and then subtly shift it. So remember, we have that heavy downward moving energy of apana during grief. And so what is going to just gently lift it? And it's okay to meet it first. So you may start with a really like a supported child's pose, and that is going to feel good for you. And the thing is, because it's a yoga practice, because you're doing it with some love and grace for yourself, you are bringing a sattvic quality to it, even though it's also tamasic. So the question is, can you do these things in a sweet, nurturing way for yourself? Now, if you're really tamasic and you have to get up and go to work, then I would, from there, move into like some breath work and maybe do a few gentle, slow sun salutations, things like that. So there are times where we just can't, we have to get it moving, right? So think about adding a little more rajas, a little more movement, but all of it with a certain sweetness and a certain gentleness. Think sattvic. For each of these, for tamas and rajas, wherever you're at on that scale, I want to give you some specific practices. For both of them, I'm going to tell you to try mantra. Mantra is repetition. You may see people with the japa mantra beads to count 108 rounds. And you can find plenty on the internet, find one that speaks to you, where the meaning speaks to you, or just the sound speaks to you. It's so good for you because it is literally changing your vibration. Remember we talked about how the whole thing, we're trying to change our vibration. Well, we're literally, when we're chanting, we are changing our vibration. They've done studies on humming and how that helps our heart rate variable and things like that. So we know this is good for us. So if nothing else, do Om over and over. That's been one for me lately that's just been feeling really good. And you can't go wrong with it. I personally have been doing a mantra that I've been doing for 20 years. And I will tell you this too. This is for those of you who aren't in the deep and early stages of a grief, but maybe you're out a ways from it, but chances are, because of the nature of life, you'll experience it again. Get your practice going now, because my mantra practice is very nurturing for me. It lifts my state. And because I've done it so much, my brain, I have a neural pathway in my brain that tells me, oh, I'm going to feel better when I do this. So just by starting to do it, my vibrational rate starts to, those frequencies of emotion start to go up, and I climb up that emotional scale just by doing it, even at the hardest times. And I'll tell you, sometimes I do mantra and I cry, but there's still just this feeling of, I always practice it even in good times with so much gratitude. So my brain just knows, okay, get into gratitude. And even when I'm feeling my worst, there's still a shred of gratitude in it. And that's still a shred of sattva. And that's still a shred of connection with my true and abiding self. And that's a good thing. Now, when you're tamasic, you may need to speed up your mantra so you don't fall asleep. And that's okay. And you may just need to do more repetitions. And when you're more rajasic, when you're like anxious and you may need to slow it down. And that's okay too. But that is one I'd give you for either place right there. Another one I would recommend for either, whether you're on the tamasic or more rajasic kind of feeling place, is guided meditations. And even if they put you to sleep, if you're really rajasic and anxious, that could be a great thing. It might slow you down enough to help you fall asleep. If you're tamasic and you fall asleep doing them, maybe make yourself sit up when you do them, or just accept, hey, I'm going to fall asleep, but on some part of my brain it's going through. With this, I would include Yoga Nidra, which is a wonderful practice no matter where you're at. All of these are bringing about we want to get into that parasympathetic nervous state where we're just out of that fight, flight, or freeze state, and we give ourselves those moments of feeling calm. By the way, as you move up that emotional scale, when you get to neutral, that's not necessarily bad. And sometimes our meditation practices will bring us to a really neutral state. And that's okay. That's just something I wanted to mention. Okay, bye. Before we wrap up this video, I do want to give you 2 specific breath practices per guna. So if you're feeling more tamasic, I've got 2 for you. And if you're feeling more rajasic, I've got 2 for you. And if you're not sure, if you're just like, I just feel like, just pick one and try it. Okay? Because honestly, looking at this list I have here, it could work for any of them. It's going to help you move up that emotional scale at least a little bit for a moment or 2. And that's what we're trying to get at first, is just drops of peace. A drop of peace and tranquility here and there. All right, the first one for tamas. If you are feeling really tamasic and you need to get your energy moving, I'm going to suggest Breath of Joy. And this comes from, I believe, Amy Weintraub's book, Yoga for Depression. I haven't read the book. I took a workshop with her, though. All right, so for Breath of Joy, we are going to move our arms like a conductor. Okay, so it's a sip of air through the nostrils as we bring our hands in front of us, as we let them fall back, as we bring them up, and then a try it with me. One more. Big exhale. All right, that one is really popular in our teacher trainings. It's also just good if you're studying and you need to kind of get your energy level up. The next one I want to give you for if you're feeling tamasic, if you're in that really despairing, heavy, dark place, is crying child's breath. And it's very similar to what we just did. And this, actually, there's lots of traditions and there's slightly different names. I'm just giving you the Baba Hari Das name for it. It's not dissimilar from what we just did, but sometimes when you're really tamasic, you don't have the energy to stand up and do what I just showed you. So what you'll do is you're just going to stay where you're at and you'll exhale. And then you take little sips in, and crying child's breath sounds horrible. I get that. But they actually apparently got it from watching how children, when they're sobbing, calm themselves down with the breath. So it's several sips in, as many as feels good. And the exhale can be nostrils or the mouth. Do what feels best for you. And I like to, you'll see my shoulders move up as I do it. And that helps with just that sense of calming and release. If you are feeling a little more rajasic, maybe you are on more in that anxiety place with it, and being still is going to be too much. It's going to make you more nervous. I would suggest trying bee's breath. I love this breath. It's just going to be good for you regardless. Or if it's not, don't do it. So for bee's breath, we're doing pratyahara. We are withdrawing the senses in a very physical way with our hands. So the thumbs go over the ears, and we're actually going to press in right there when we do it. Pinkies at the corner of the mouth, and you'll see different variations of this. It just kind of doesn't matter as long as your eyes are closed and you're closing off the ears. Now, if that's just anxiety producing for you, you can do a version of it like this, and there's some like this too. If you can get the ears closed, that's a key piece, because it's called bee's breath because it makes a buzzing like a bee sound in your head. Now, when I've worked with clients before, they always think that I hear the same thing all the time. That helps so much, and yet it seems so counterintuitive. This doesn't seem like something that would help, but it really can make you feel good. And I think, again, it comes back to what I was talking about with mantras. Some of it's just that humming that's so good for us. So you close everything off and you take a breath in, and then you hum. And it creates a vibration like almost like a whole hive of bees in your head. So let's just try one together so you can get the hang of it. Put your fingers in place. After I say inhale, go ahead and close off your ears, and you're going to hum, and you'll hear me humming, and just keep going till you're done, okay? Inhale, close your ears and hum. Okay? I love that one. The last one I want to give to you for if you're feeling rajasic and you just need to cool off a bit. If you want to become more peaceful, is belly breathing. Belly breathing is really helpful for getting us out of fight or flight and turning on the parasympathetic nervous system when it's done properly. So for belly breathing, I don't want you to worry about breathing deeply. Let that go. It's a soft breath. Soft breath, okay? And it's just a comfortable breath into the belly. So you'll put your hand on your belly, and as you inhale, your belly expands. As you exhale, your belly comes in. That's all it is. That breath, you can also lie down on the floor in a crocodile pose. You can make a triangle and hold your forehead and just practice pressing your belly into the floor. That's also a very nice pose for this kind of work. Okay, so the tools we've talked about so far are mantra and how you can adjust it for your needs. I'm always going to be sticking my thumb up, so just get used to that thumbs up, I guess. We talked about guided meditations and how helpful they can be. They just take the pressure off of you. They often have beautiful music. Just a nice, sweet, reassuring voice can be so kind and loving and get you into a slightly more sattvic place. We talked about kinds of breath that may or may not be. Just try them. Don't overanalyze. Am I being rajasic? Am I being tamasic? Just try the one that speaks to you and notice how it shifts your energy. The last thing I want to talk to you about is just the ongoing day-to-day practice of Pratipaksha Bhavana, and what does that look like. There is, in yoga, we want to constantly be aware of how we are thinking and feeling and how that impacts us. And when we get into grief, there's so much, and it's so fast. Even when it's heavy, there's just this, that we can miss a lot of our thoughts and our feelings. And again, it's not to analyze it, but it's so that we can choose one that hurts less. The goal of yoga is liberation from suffering, and Pratipaksha Bhavana helps get us on this path to becoming more sattvic and choosing the less harmful thoughts and feelings. What I would suggest to you is that, yes, while grief is a process, that does not mean that we need to stick our finger in the wound of, say, guilt, self-hatred, of any of these things. They may come up, and it's okay to recognize them and see them, but then how can we focus our minds in a way that brings us to a softer, sweeter place? I'll give you an example. I have some guilt about how my dog died, and it's been coming up, and that's okay. It's going to. But I'm also not going to reside in that place. It's not going to become my state of being. And working my way out of it means that each time I feel it, I recognize it. And one of the things I do is I just practice, well, what does my body feel like when I don't feel guilt? This is a form of Pratipaksha Bhavana. Well, I know, and I can imagine, what does it feel like to be free of guilt? Well, I don't have that clenching feeling in my stomach. Well, what does that feel like? So just kind of using the imagination and talking myself through it. And I can often get my body to a state where it starts saying different things and almost commanding my mind to think different things. That is one way to go about it. Another way is to go completely off topic and to recognize the infinite power we have to direct our minds and to command our inner state, even when it's really hard. So I have had a hard time doing my more normal and formal meditation practice. My concentration is very off. It's just not happening. I keep trying and my brain is just not doing it. And I had this recording for an abundance meditation, and that's nowhere near on my mind right now. And that's really, in a lot of ways, this meditation isn't even, I wouldn't call it yogic, except that we as yogis can make any experience yogic by understanding yoga and applying its principles. However, I did this meditation just out of like, I need to have a chunk of time where my consciousness is in control of my mind again. And because it was so off topic, I was able to access higher level feelings. I was able to practice like that state of abundance that felt really good and this and that. And it really did, it helped me to redirect my focus for the length of the meditation, as well as to practice some of the more empowered good feelings on that emotional scale. I'm not saying to deflect or to avoid, but I am saying that we as yogis, again, our goal is to reach liberation by ultimately deciding what our interior environment is like. And personally, I'd like mine to have more joy, and that I'd like this grief process to bring me closer to that rather than ultimately farther from it. One last note, Pratipaksha Bhavana might mean doing something that doesn't seem like yoga, but it shifts our interior state. So what do I mean by this? I mean, if you are a runner and you go for a run and it makes you feel better, running may not be yoga per se, but it is a yogic activity when we are engaging in it in a way in order to consciously shift our interior state. So you can take a yogic nap, you can take a yogic bath, right? Any of these things can be Pratipaksha Bhavana in order to nurture yourself, give yourself more of that sattvic quality right now. None of this is meant to criticize the way anyone else is approaching grief. And there are all different kinds of griefs. And as many as there are relationships between people and their loved ones. So I'm including our beloved little animals in that as well. My goal with this is our whole goal with Yoga How To. The accessibility goal is really about making the ways to take yoga off the mat and into our lives, or to use it for very practical things for our experiences in life, like grief, in very real ways. So to take these philosophies, take these understandings, and share them with people who want to bring them into their life. So I hope that this supports you. It's never meant to judge you. I have so much compassion for you wherever you're at in your grief journey. I would like to know, do you have yoga practices that support you or have supported you with grief? All right, friends, thanks so much. And thank you for all the loving and kind words, as well as this situation happened with Ladybug. I appreciate it immensely. Please do like and subscribe. As I mentioned, it just means the world to us.